No, it's fine. We'll just do audio. All right, so here's what we're going to do. In the past year, we've explored the sources in the Maimonides, where the Rambam makes it very clear that the belief in creation ex nihilo is something that we accept based on certain great people who propounded that. As we discussed, there's a place for legislation in beliefs, in what we're supposed to hold. Because Rambam says that when you have something which is doubtful, which can go either way, so you can leave it open, or you could take a position, as we discussed. And there's a part of the religion is that we take this position, and that's what the Rambam does the work to show the reason why we would take a position, why it's reasonable to do so, and why it's beneficial for religion, and why it's part of the political system, because our forefather, patriarch, and our prophet taught this idea. Okay, so that was last year. But we're going to see today that it's a little more complicated and deeper, and we're going to pick up where we left, which is that there's a contradiction, because there's a few sources where the Rambam indicates that actually prophecy revealed this fact that cannot be known through speculation alone. These are the steers that we ended up with last week, and I'm going to review the three sources where the Rambam seems to indicate, unlike all those sources that we amassed, which show that we believe it because it's more likely, we believe it because of Abraham and Moshe, and they were great people, the Gavra of Abraham and Moshe, not that they have a direct message from God about this, but they're people who we respect their opinions and we follow them, etc. And I'm going to show you that we have these sources where the Rambam says that we accept it because prophecy can reveal facts. Okay? So here are the two most explicit ones. One is in Seif Perek Tezayin. So in Chelik Beis Perek Tezayin, and if you're using the Mifal Mishnah Torah edition, it's paragraph number 4, where the Rambam says that what I seek to clarify is that Chiddush HaOlam is not impossible, and all the philosophical proofs that seem to indicate that that's not the case can be neutralized. The proofs against Chiddush can be neutralized. The Kimun Shadavaz His Amisli, once I can establish that, once I know this, that the proofs, philosophical proofs that claim to prove the eternity of the world, the kadmos of the world, are neutralized, so she'elo zu dahainu kadmos ha'olam b'chidush ha'pesucha, such that the question of kadmos or chiddush is open. Harei ani mekabel oisa mitzad ha'nevuah. The Rambam makes this declaration, Harei ani mekabel oisa mitzad ha'nevuah. Why do I accept chiddush? Because of prophecy. And prophecy is meva'eres devarim she'en b'koyach ha'iyun la'agia aleim. Prophecy can clarify things that Iyun cannot reach. So clearly the Rambam does not mean, maybe you'll say, oh, the Rambam doesn't mean prophecy, he means great people who happen to be prophets, but he clearly means prophecy because he goes out of his way to say that you should know prophecy can reveal facts that people cannot know through their intellect.
Didn't he say that Abraham got it from Iyun?
Yes, that's the problem. Exactly. Rambam said explicitly in Chelik Beis Gimel, and we saw this other places he indicates that. But Chelik Beis Gimel says explicitly that Avraham taught Chiddush because Iyun brought him to this. And here he says he accepts it mitzad ha-nevuah, and nevuah can explain things that one cannot know through Iyun.
Is there a significance to the lesson of accepting it versus knowing it in this sentence?
Okay, that's very interesting. Right. What do you have? Makabel, right.
Accepts it.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Right. So even here, he doesn't say, it's a good deal. He doesn't say that I know it to be true because I know that Moshe and Abraham were him, and I know that they didn't lie, and I trust them, let's say, that they said this, and therefore I know it's true. Right? He doesn't say that. Okay. Right. So, Kabbalah. Interesting. Acceptance. Okay, he says the same thing in Chelik Aleph, Perek Ayin Aleph. This is in paragraph 17. So he says like this. He says, this is when he says what he's going to do, how he's going to prove, how he's going to go about proving the existence of God and his unity, his incorporeality. He's not going to do the kalam mahalach, which relies on chiddush. He's going to assume kadmas ha'olam, and through that he's going to prove the existence of the deity and etc. And then he says, then when we get to the question of chiddush, if you accept the kalam proof and you think that's a proof to chiddush olam ashrecha, here he says, stresses it, right? Like as a Kabbalah. So if you accept that Mudash as a Kabbalah from the Nevi'im, that's begging the question, because can there really be Nevuah if the world is Kadam? Yes, there can be, he says, which he also deals with this in the other sources. Don't think that Nevuah itself is totally in Chiddush Olam. It's not. Okay, why would you think that? And is there a link? Perhaps we'll get to that in next year, maybe. Okay, but here again, the Rambam says that ultimately the choices are either to think it's proven because of the Kalam or because the Nevi'im says it. And the third source that I saw for this, which is not so explicit, this is in the Chelik Beis, Parak Tes Vav, another source that we looked at in the past, is the end of Parak Tes Vav, paragraph number 8, where he says that people make a mistake and think that Aristotle was certain, had believed that he had certain proof about Katnos. And basically they're relying on the philosophers as authorities, sort of, because they think, oh, that's what the philosophers hold, without actually going through the proofs and seeing that they don't really have proofs. And instead, says the Rambam, they shouldn't only rely on the philosophers who have Chachma, but they avoid Divrei Kol HaNevi'im. And the reason why they avoid Divrei Kol HaNevi'im, why do these people not follow the Nevi'im, follow philosophers? Right? Because the Nevi'im don't speak with teachings, they speak as information from God. And that's something that Rambam says you need extra seichel. Very interesting passage over here. Rambam says only some people that are blessed with intellect realize that that's interesting, important, this message from God, okay? Which is what's he doing over here. And I'm going to get back to this a little bit today. But he seems to be indicating that the two paths I want to take are either the path of philosophy or recognizing that people who have information in the name of God. And that's where they get Chiddush from. Like he says more explicitly in the other two places, where he says, you accept it, one would accept it because the Nevi'im say so. Okay, so this is the contradiction that we ended off previous year. Is it Eon that Avraham reached, and is it the Gavra Moshe, who is our Navi, the Gavra Avraham, who is our patriarch? Those great people who Rambam says they set up the world and society and so on and so forth, which is like a political thing. They're the best legislators that we should follow. We should follow their legislation about opinions. Is that what it is? Or is it prophecy revealing truths that are inaccessible to you? Okay, so I want to go ahead and ask two more contradictions, and then I want to suggest something that's going to give us a different approach, different way of thinking about all this. Let's see. In Chelik Beis Perek Yud Tes, what the Rambam does is, Chelik Beis Perek Yud Tes, he does something that he does again in Perek Chof Dal, but I'm not even sure exactly what the difference is. Which, what he does in Perek Yud Tes is that he demonstrates that Aristotle's theory of reality, which is that everything is exactly as it must be. I'm just going to show that doesn't withstand scrutiny. And what he's going to show that is from analyzing the heavens, his understanding of the heavens, of astronomy, and showing how Aristotle's mahalach in explaining the motion of the heavens falls short of explaining discrepancies, anomalies, you could say, in the heavens. Basically, why does one sphere move from east to west and another sphere move from west to east? And why does one go quicker than the other? And there's no rhyme or reason to that, because some of them that are lower than others go quicker than the one that's higher, and sometimes reverse. There's no way to explain it. Rather, what? It must be that God particularized it, it was miyachid, with his karvanah, with his ruts, and God wanted it to be that way. Cannot explain the heavens, says the Rambam. The heavens cannot be explained according to Aristotelian science. And Aristotle didn't know this because astronomy wasn't as so advanced in his days, but now we know that the heavens can't be explained. Of course, naturally we have to think about updating this parak post Einstein, Newton, etc.
Change it from heavens to quantum.
Yeah, but then there's the question of the God of the gaps. Like, is this really? But I don't know. It might not be such a bad God. It might be that's the definition of God, but there's always something that's not understood. Okay, the kids are at least one. We're not doing this now. Okay, let's go. The point is now we're learning the Rambam ala Rambam, and of course there's a lot to learn from the Rambam. Yeah, and one day someone will write a new Nevuchim. I hope he listens to the Yeshua. Get some help from them. Okay, so let's read paragraph number 23 in the chapter 19. That's on page 130 in the Mifal Mishatay. Ilu sidra hadvar me'el al derech hachiyuv, to arrange the heavens, to say that the arrangement is as it must be. Remember what must be means? It's reasonable, and reason is what has to be, because reason is reasonable. The loike kavana, rather, and not to say it's Hashem had a kavana and an unscrutable and not a kind of wish or desire that we cannot analyze. It's very hard to grasp such a thing. Very far from conceptualizing that. An Aristotelian conception of reality and applying it to the heavenly motions. There's no greater proof to kavana. There's different motions of the spheres, and that the stars that are set in the spheres, and that can't be, whatever that is. He says, why do the Nevi'im always talk about the stars as proof to God? And we have this Messiah about Abraham Avinu that he learned from the stars. He looked up at the heavens, okay, and he brings a pasuk in Yeshaya, and then he says, Avram said, Hashem Elikei HaShamayim, and Moshe Rabbeinu said, Roichev Shamayim. So what is this whole focus on the heavens? And it's bringing us to God. Why does Moshe call Hashem Roichev Shamayim? Why do we talk about Avram looking at the stars? Because, says the Rambam, the stars show that Aristotle's model of reality is incomplete. Okay. Now, by the way, Agav, remember I said that astronomy advanced beyond Aristotle. Now we discovered this, so it's particular retro to say that Avraham Avinu was post-Aristotelian astronomy, and he knew that it's a little weird thing going on here, right? Because he excuses Aristotle here somewhere in the back. Yeah, that astronomy in his days was not so advanced. Do you know where that is? I believe it's in this parak. Huh?
I see it in mine.
Yeah, okay, so here it's in the end of paragraph number 17. So Aristotle wasn't aware of these problems. But this is the Messiah, and this is what the Nevi'im mean when they say, look at the heavens, you'll see God. They mean study astronomy beyond what Aristotle. Okay, obviously I'm saying this is actually Maimonides. There's a question.
His proof knocks out Aristotle. It doesn't really do much for Plato.
Mm-hmm. That is correct. That's right.
Okay.
That goes back to the old thing of
That really doesn't seem
he's ignoring Plato, right? But yeah, he's ignoring Plato, and Plato could appear in many of the Prakim. If you start plugging in Plato, you wouldn't have problems, including the climactic parak of Perplexed, where he actually deals with Plato, where he says, really, the Psukim could work with Aristotle, just then the whole Torah falls apart because then there's no Nisim, but in Plato they can't be. Yeah. Right. That gets to the question of the first year. What does Rambam really want? Does he really want creation ex nihilo, or does he really want that there's an element of will? Okay, and then the way to think about that is to think like that. That gets back to that. Okay, so what was Avram's proof in the heavens? According to the Moreh Nevuchim Chelik Beis Parak Yotes, Avram's proof in the heavens. When we talk about Avram looked at the heavens and he knew God, it means he said, "Look, how could Plato go in this direction and Venus go in that direction, or whatever? It doesn't add up. Speeds don't add up. Something's going on over here. This is not just a clockwork universe, basically. Maybe it's a clockwork universe, but I shouldn't say it's not a clockwork universe. Maybe a clockwork universe, but the design of the clock doesn't follow reason. The design of the clock indicates will, creator, with kavana. Okay, now contrast that to parak. This is another one of my contradictions I want to ask. Contrast that to some of the Zohar parak Aleph, where the Rambam also describes Avraham Avinu's discovery of God, and there, Avraham Avinu's discovery of God matches the Rambam's proof to the existence of God in the beginning of Chelik Beis, which is based on the eternity of the universe. Okay, because there he says in Chelik Aleph, in Parak Aleph, Allah given us Avraham Avinu grew older, and he started thinking day and night. What was his kasha? How could the galgal constantly move without having someone who's controlling it? What is making the spheres move? It can't move itself. Now, why can't it move itself? We look at the beginning of Chelik Beis. Why can't it move itself? Lots of things move themselves. It can't move itself because, as he says, it's Mesaviv Tamid. And as Rambam explains in the beginning of Chelik Beis and in Yisod Torah Parak Aleph, this is the proof to God. Eternity of motion. If the spheres move for an eternity and have been moving for an eternity, maybe will move for an eternity, that's where things get complicated. But basically, this is working with kadmos as a concept. The world is eternal. Eternal motion, an eternal force, requires an infinite force requires an infinite mass to contain it, and mass cannot be infinite. Ergo, there must be an external force. This is the Rambam's proof to the deity. One of his proofs. He has a few proofs in the Megillah Beis. But anyways, here the Rambam's proof in Avraham Avinu's reading into Avraham Avinu. What was his proof from looking at the heavens? Is that it's the eternal motion of the heavens. So here in Megillah Beis Perek the Rambam says that Avraham Avinu inferred the existence of God from the particularization of the heavens, and he inferred a chiddush kind of God. In Chasavad Zara, the Rambam says that Avraham Avinu thought about the eternity of motion and inferred the existence of God, but that it's in a way that works with context. I'm asking a steer context. I'm just asking which thing about the heavens impressed Avraham Avinu. We have a contradiction. And the exact same contradiction we have regards to this pasuk that the Rambam brings in Chelik Beis Perek, which is Roichev Shemayim. He says, why is Hashem called Roichev Shemayim? Because the Nevi'im always use the heavens as the proof for God. This is back in Chelik Beis Perek, paragraph number 23. Why is Hashem called Roichev Shemayim? Because the heavens indicate His existence. And how do the heavens indicate His existence? Because of this particularization, the heavens don't follow pure reason, right? In Chelik Aleph, Perek Ayin, where the Ram talks about the word Rochav, there he also talks about this pasuk. This is the end of Perek Ayin, Chelik Aleph, in paragraph number 10. And here the Rambam says, it's on page 266 in the Chumash Torah, Sheha Omer Roichev Shemayim, that when the pasuk says Roichev Shemayim, Mashma Usai, what that means is Misoivev Hagalgal Hamakif. He's the one who moves the outer galgal, the outer sphere, because you have all these concentric spheres, and the outermost sphere is moved by God's will. He moves it with his power and will. And then he ends the parak by saying, this is the greatest proof to the existence of God, which is Kavanasi l'sivav hagalgal, right? So what does it mean, Roichev Shemayim? Hashem moves the heavens, and this is so important because the greatest proof to the existence of God is the motion of the heavens. That's in the beginning of Chelik Beis, as everyone correctly says. Not Chelik Beis Perek. Chelik Beis Perek is not the sieve of Galgal, it's the variations within the Galgal. In Chelik Aleph Perek Ayin, the Rambam says Roichev Shemayim indicates God because the greatest proof to God is obviously not the proof, this particularization, which maybe suggests Chiddush. It's not such a great proof, right? Because he doesn't think we know Chiddush. The greatest proof to God is the eternity of motion. So what does Roichev Shemayim mean? Does Roichev Shemayim mean we know the existence of Hashem because of this particularization of the heavens? Does Roichev Shemayim mean it's because of the eternity of the heavens? And we have the same exact question about Avraham Avinu's his blindness in the heavens. But what was he looking at? Was he looking at the discrepancy of the heavens, or was he looking at the uniformity and the eternity of motion? All right, now, besides for all this, I have another kasha. Avraham Avinu was a philosopher? Yeah? Bitmir? Okay. No, I'll tell you what my kasha is. First of all, we had this other question about the astronomy. How is it Avraham Avinu's astronomy was advanced beyond Aristotelian astronomy? Okay, how'd that happen? And when did that get forgotten? What, Shmuel? I'm asking the question? It's not a good question? I don't get it.
That's a good question.
It is, right? Look at the beginning of Chelik Beis Perek Vav. The Rambam says that, this is a fascinating thing. He says people think that Aristotle thought that he had proof to Kadmos. Now, Aristotle said X, Y, Z. look in his book on the heavens and other books, and he says things that support Kadmus. People think Aristotle thinks that those supports are proofs. Rambam says, "Ein lachshed ba'Aristo." You can't be choshed that Aristotle thought that those statements are actually proofs. Why? Why can't you be choshed? Maybe he made a mistake. In other words, did Aristotle make a mistake and think that his arguments in favor of Kadmus were actual proofs? No, can't be. Shaharei Aristo hu asher limidus b'nei adam as darkei ha'achocha. Aristo is the one who taught human beings how to prove things. What are the laws of proofs? So Rambam gives this historical piece of information, which basically matches what we know historically, that Aristotle is the one who developed and educated humanity in the rules of logic and proving things. Okay. So that means then that prior to Aristotle, people didn't know how to do this. The proof from the eternity of the motion of the spheres takes 26 hanachas. It's a very complicated proof. This whole business of particularization, I don't know. I'm not sure about it. It takes advanced astronomy for sure. Maybe it doesn't take Aristotelian. I don't know what it takes. But if Abraham Avinu, if the people prior to Aristotle didn't know didn't know logic, didn't know how to prove things, that's not how they operated, then we're guilty of a grave anachronism by reading into Abraham Avinu an Aristotelian kind of proof. Bain for Kaddish, Bain for Chiddush. The proof for Chiddush is also following Aristotelian logic. And B'chlal, I'm saying if someone would ask you like this, we know we have a Messiah, a 5,000-year-old Messiah, or whatever, 3,000-year-old Messiah, about Avraham Avinu and the heavens and stuff, right? And he found Hashem. And someone asks you, how did he find Hashem? You'll start telling him ontological proof or Anselm's, whatever that guy, cosmological, whatever, all these things. Like, hey, Mechdesa. Don't maybe I should, you should do? You want to know how Avraham Avinu proved Hashem? Let's go get a Ugarit scholar, someone who knows Code of Hammurabi. I don't know, whatever. You have to get the context. No? I'm saying, why would you think? What is very special question. Very nice, philosophy, azay, but why would you think Avraham Avinu did? Is there every reason to think Avraham Avinu thought that way? So when Rambam says Avraham Avinu thought this and this and this, I pose the question, how does he know Avraham Avinu? Why would he think? It seems like anachronistic to read into Avraham Avinu an Aristotelian kind of analysis. You might not have an alternative. I'm not saying we could actually know what Avraham Avinu thought, but okay, so just say you don't know what he thought. What's what I'm saying? Rambam tells you in Chazavad Zay, it tells you what Avraham Avinu thought. Galgal is Seiv of Tamid. Do you know what it takes to figure out that the Galgal is Seiv of Tamid? You know why Aristotle thought the Galgal is Seiv of Tamid? Because the whole Torah is with the circular motion and whatever. You know how much it takes to get to such a hanacha? Tamid meaning Tamid that the Kadmos. There is literally no problem. Again, there's no problem with a world that lasts for 6,000 years and doesn't have an external motor. Because things could run on their own fumes, whatever, for 6,000 years. No problem with that. Elamai no Kadmos. How do you know Kadmos? Like I said, it takes 25 hanachas. Very complicated. Avraham Avinu figured out Kadmos? Make a taste. Just make a taste. Okay? And remember, we saw also in the end of Perplexed, the Rambam says like this. Rambam says, why do people not listen to Nevi'im? Because they only want people who are doing things that are limud, not people that are doing things Haidas and Makil. So now, one second. So what are the Nevi'im doing? What is Avraham doing? Avraham is doing the limud. In Chesavad Zara, in Hilchis, in the Avraham Avinu is also doing limud. The Rambam says that the Nevi'im speak with statements in the name of God. Okay? Which brings us back to our first contradiction, Batson. Are we talking about Iyun? And then Iyun somehow means Aristotle because maybe, I don't know, what else could it mean? We don't want to impute bad Iyun to Avraham, do we? Okay, but how do you know he's doing good Iyun? But is that what's happening? Iyun of one sort or the other? Or is it Nebuah? Okay, so here's what I want to suggest. Those are the contradictions. So we have three contradictions and one big question. The three contradictions are, is it Iyun or Nebuah? Did Avraham Avinu look at the heavens and see a Kadmos kind of proof to God or a Chiddush kind of proof to God? The same steer we have in Reichev Shemayim. And I have a much more basic question, is what's this business of attributing to Avraham Avinu kinds of proofs that you have to be even maybe beyond Aristotle, at least in astronomy, but you have to at least be Aristotle to be able to think this way. So I want to suggest the following. That it's both theory and nevuah. Why? How could that be? If the nevuah tells us the facts of Chiddush Olam, then we know it because nevuah tells us the fact. Right? We're done. So I want to say no. Nevuah does not tell us the fact of Chiddush. It doesn't tell us the scientific fact of Chiddush. What? No, I want to say like this. Nevuah asserts that this is an appropriate belief. The same way we spoke about last week. Everything we spoke about, why that the legislator, and I think we almost got to this last week, that being a Navi might tell you this is the right thing to legislate. We're talking about Moshe Rabbeinu, that he's the legislator. So that's what I'm saying. The Rambam never says that he knows that the world is created ex nihilo because a Navi can tell you a scientific fact that you don't know otherwise. A Navi could tell you a scientific fact that you don't know otherwise. It's true. Because a Navi could know things through Nevuah that you don't know through Iyun. Now, what could you know through Iyun? You could know scientific facts. You could also know political facts, like legislative facts. What's a good belief? You can know that through Iyun also, right? Through Iyun, you can know physics, metaphysics, on the heavens, those books of Aristotle. And you can also know politics through Iyun. You could also know things through Nevuah that you can know through Iyun. That means Nevuah could give you political wisdom. It could also give you scientific wisdom. I'm suggesting that when the Rambam says that Nevuah tells us Chiddush, he doesn't mean that Nevuah tells us the scientific knowledge of Chiddush, the physical knowledge of Chiddush. Nevuah tells us the appropriateness of that belief. And let's go back to your diak. You said the Rambam says I'm a Kabbalah from the Nevi'im. Because the Nevi'im said, as a Navi, I have a message from Hashem. A message from Hashem is, this is what people should believe. Not that I have a message from Hashem, but this is the fact. Okay? So just like we spoke about the idea that a legislator could determine it, so now we're saying it's not just a legislator that's determining it, it's a legislator that's determining this. He knows that this is the correct legislation. How does he know? Because Nevuah told him that this is the right legislation, the right law.
Couldn't have done the wrong thing.
No.
The facts weren't like that. So it becomes a circular line.
No, it doesn't, because like that. So here's where we get interesting. So the way the Rambam looks at this, so Tavi wants to know, well, if someone has a prophecy that this is what people should believe, doesn't that mean that this is the truth? Yeah.
Why couldn't the word just tell us?
Okay.
Scientific
right. Okay. That's an interesting question as well. Okay. So we have two questions here. And I'm going to add a third one. Two questions. One question is, if the Nevuah tells us what that's appropriate to believe something, doesn't that mean that it's scientifically true? Second question is, why didn't the Nevuah tell us the scientific truth? And the third question I'm going to add is, how does Rambam know that the Nevuah didn't tell us the scientific truth, but told us the political truth? Okay? So let's take one at a time. Let's say there's something that human beings cannot know. The Rambam says explicitly there will never be a proof to Kadmos. I don't know if he ever says there will never be a proof to Chiddush. I don't remember if he says that. But remember he talks about things that are be'etzem open-ended questions, right? So now, in that situation, there could be something that's the right path politically. And the Navi could know that this is the right political decision, even if he doesn't know the underlying truth. And I dispute your assertion that, well, if it's not really true, if Chiddush is not really true, would it still be appropriate for people to believe Chiddush? Yeah, maybe.
No, that's
right.
Okay.
So therefore, the Navi knowing that Chiddush is the right belief does not indicate that we can't infer that Chiddush is the physical fact, because what if the physical fact is beyond us ever knowing, and therefore humans always going to be in the dark about that? Then it's always going to be a question of what's right politically, and that's what the Nevuah could be about. Or Imtim Tzleimar Torah could be bottled, which Rambam holds again, then it could be updated, but whatever. So I'm saying in the Rambam holds the Torah is forever, so you have to say that this state of ignorance, we're learning the Rambam now. In the Rambam, the state of ignorance is baked into humanity, so humanity will always have a question of what should we take on this, and the Navi could find out. Yeah, not a thing on the scale. With a certainty, this is the right thing. This is the right thing to believe. And now does the Navi know why it's the right thing? Now, but let's say another question: why can't the Navi just find out the facts? Now, the answer is like this: the answer is it doesn't work that way. Navi doesn't just find out whatever he wants to find out. It's a chiddush. Remember, the Rambam has to tell you a chiddush. The Rambam says that Nevuah could tell you things that Iyun can't reach you. In the Rambam's conception of Nevuah, that's actually a chiddush. Because really Nevuah is about your intellect having an impact and an effect on your imagination and putting images in your mind which parallel what you know. Okay? Or what you intuit.
But you can't intuit or know this.
Right. Kamashma in the Rambam, you should know, by the way, that Nevuah could tell you things that you, even beyond what you could know. Okay? But that doesn't mean that just you could ask and find out whatever you want, or that Nevuah will tell you whatever is the best thing to know. But, and wait a second, I want to say even more so. In the Rambam's world, I don't even think it's a good idea for Nevuah to tell us Chiddush Ayim. Because if Nevuah tells us that it's a good idea to believe Chiddush, that's actually something that we can then, 1,000 years later, if we're the Rambam, we can figure out why that's the case. Maybe even till now they can figure out why that's the case. In other words, the arguments why a person should believe Chiddush support the content of the Nevuah. Let me see what I'm saying. The Nevi'im said that they should believe Chiddush, right? So the Rambam says, I accept it from the Nevi'im, right? And then he says, because Nevi'im could tell us what we can't know otherwise. What he's saying over there is like this. Even if you don't understand why you should believe Chiddush, I'm going to argue later, says the Rambam, that you should believe Chiddush. But even if you don't understand why you should believe Chiddush, you could still believe the Nevi'im who said that you should believe Chiddush. The Rambam, am going to explain to you why the Nevi'im are right. They had a Nevuah. The Nevuah was, it is proper for people to believe Chiddush. Did they know why it's proper for people to believe Chiddush? I don't know. Open question. How do we know? I don't know what Abraham Avinu knew, what Moshe Rabbeinu knew. I don't know.
This is how you get Abraham to be a philosopher.
Right.
Because he's
He's not a philosopher. He's not a philosopher. He had a Nevuah. Now, here's the thing. We are philosophers. This is what the whole Moreh Nevuchim is about. The whole Moreh Nevuchim is about, it starts like this. Who's the Moreh Nevuchim written for? As he says in the Psicha. As it says in the Psicha. This is in the Psicha in paragraph number 2 on page 14. I mean, this is a famous thing that the book is written for someone who, this is the sixth line. Mataras achibur azehi lahar l'adam dasi shekvar nikva benafshe v'huska b'hamanaseh munut. You have a person. Who's this book for? Someone who's certain of the truth of the Torah. It's already established in his mind. He knows the Torah is true. And and he's perfect in his religion and his midas, and he looked in philosophy, and he knows the meaning of philosophy. And therefore he has a problem about the surface meaning of the Torah seems to contradict what he knows to be true through philosophy. And therefore he's Navach. Okay? So what's the Mevucha that the Moreh Nevuchim is addressing? The Mevucha is someone who he starts off being certain of the truth of the Torah because he knows the Torah is true, kacha. And at the same time, he studied philosophy, and his mevucha is how to reconcile the two. So, just like the Rambam does in the whole Sefer, where he's reconciling Torah with knowledge. So there's a Torah belief that says it's politically correct. It's the right thing politically, that it is to say. It's the right thing politically and legislatively for people to believe in Chiddush. Now I want to know why that's the case. Okay, so I'm going to tell you why that's the case. And that's what Rambam does, because there's kinds of eons, which I'm going to talk about, and it's good for religious beliefs, etc., etc. But that doesn't mean that the source of it is that same mean. Well, what's Shmuel's question that still stands?
Because there's no reason the Lord couldn't do that. Why does
Right.
Rambam need to say that it can't?
Can't what?
That it can't tell me a fact.
Maybe it did tell us
Maybe
that.
it does tell me
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Right. And the way I'm understanding I'm understanding what you're saying is that a legislative belief is always in the situation of the diavad, where we can't prove this, so therefore we will legislate the better of the two.
Right.
But Nevuah hypothetically could tell us any fact.
Right.
So why would Nevuah handicap itself to telling us legislative beliefs?
Okay, so that's not the right question. I'll tell you why. Because it could be that Nevi'im never accessed this, just because they didn't.
Or framed differently, why is it so important for Rambam for this question to be open?
That's the question. The question is the right question is, how does the Rambam know that the Nevuos didn't tell it? Why does the Rambam assert that the Nevuos never actually settled this question once and for all? That gets us back to the other question of which Nevuos exactly does the Rambam see Chiddush in an absolute sense, given that in Chelik Beis Pekafei he says the Psukim can be. So that's an open question. Maybe we'll get to that next year, hopefully. Where exactly is this Nevuah? Okay, so I don't think we can answer the question of how does the Rambam know that the Nevuah didn't tell us the fact, the scientific fact, without figuring out exactly where this Nevuah is. I think those two questions definitely go together. Okay?
It's almost like he's starting out with, I need to keep this in my thought.
Interesting. I don't know. Interesting. Yeah. Right. It's also, you have to understand another thing. This gets complicated. Like, if there's a nevuah about some fact that we have no way to approach as a truth, as a certainty, okay? If there's a nevuah about a scientific fact that we can't know as a scientific fact, so that's like some side proof that something's the case. That's not knowledge. It's not knowledge. If you know that, if the Navi tells you something that you can never know from its causes, you can never know why that's true. You can never see it. You can never see how one reaches that conclusion. Then it's not in knowledge because you don't know the reasons for it. It's just stop. You want to accept something as a fact. Okay, you accept it as a fact. That's the furthest thing from Chachma. The political belief of Chiddush, given that the Rambam can explain why it's appropriate, so he's doing the objective of his whole Sefer, which is to make the Torah consistent with Chachma. So again, I'm not answering the question of how does the Rambam know they didn't tell us this, but it is interesting to understand that the way the Rambam sets it up, okay, even if you're not a Navi, but you're basically doing what it takes to maybe get that nevuah, right? Some people look at Mordechai Nevuchim not incorrectly as a guide to become a Navi. Okay, so here's the chachma that you have to think about that will lead to that nevuah. Everyone wants to have the same nevuah, right? You want to be like Moshe and Abraham. You want to have that nevuah also that you should believe in Chiddush. In other words, you want to believe in Chiddush not because Moshe and Abraham did, but because you know that you should believe in Chiddush. That would be a nevuah, basically. You know it, the Brirus, Koyam Hashem. Okay, well, here's what it takes to do that. You have to be Isaac in the chachma that leads to Chiddush, and the chachma that leads to a political belief in Chiddush. The chachma doesn't believe to a Gzeres HaKosav that this is just the way it is and accept it kind of Chiddush. So, okay, I'll just put it that way. I mean, are there actual scientific facts that the Rambam's Nevi'im revealed? Not clear, by the way. Meaning, but I don't think there's any difference. I don't think there's any difference between a scientific fact and a political fact. Meaning, the Navi who says, I believe that this is the right policy, but he can't explain why, I'm certain, Koyam Hashem, this is what everyone should believe. And he say, why? And he says, I don't know. It's the exact same thing as the Navi says, Koyam Hashem, I created the world from nothing. And they're like, how do you know that? I don't know. There's no difference. I don't see any difference. Meaning, political fact is also a scientific fact. It's a scientific fact of politics that human race is so constituted and history is so constituted that believing this is a good idea. What? So no difference.
But that's not idea.
It is.
It is idea.
It is the idea. It's the idea about what's best for the human race. Why is ethics and politics?
In essence, it is.
Right.
It is setting a fact.
Right. However, that fact is a fact. Right. That's what I'm saying. It's not really any different. However, that fact is a fact that the Rambam can at least bring us close to. Mashing the fact of it being, in other words, the Rambam can do what's necessary to give us a training of maybe us having the same nevuah, because we can believe why it's politically right. Yeah. But we can never know that it's absolutely.
How do you equate? It seems like inconsistent. Basically, you're saying we have a question, Chiddush Kadmas.
Right.
We're going to spend trucking and proofs back and forth to try to figure this out.
Mm-hmm.
We can't figure it out. But instead, we'll legislate one way.
Right.
You're basically giving up on the question.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying we can't know, so we're going to have to choose one way. How could you equate that reality and that truth, so to speak? It's a truth of it's a like I was saying earlier. It's the b'diavad. You can't. How could you say it's the same qualitative truth and reality as finding out a scientific fact?
Oh, because it is a scientific fact. No, it's a scientific. No, it's a scientific fact about politics. Politics is science.
I'm saying qualitatively less scientific than figuring out the actual underlying science.
Yeah. Okay. So I hear. But if we can never know the science, fine. We can never know the science.
But then you're saying, but at the same
No,
time,
you might want to ask. I think it's an interesting question.
Scientific fact.
What?
Because it's politically.
No, we don't know the scientific. We can't know the science of the fact. We can't know the cosmology. We can't know the cosmology perfectly. That's our Metzias. Now, I think it's an interesting question. Why is that the Metzias? Like why does Rambam have that agenda? Fine. And even if Rambam didn't have that agenda, it might be interesting to ask, why is the world so constituted that human beings, according to Rambam, can never figure out their origin? I think that's an interesting question. But given that that's the reality, then why isn't legislation the right way to go? It's not a cop-out. This is the Metzias. And there's a reason for that being the Metzias. Okay?
I'm not saying it's not the right way to go. I'm just saying.
I mean, the reason is because Chiddush is anti-reason. I mean, as we discussed in the first year. The reason is because Chiddush is anti-reason. There's an anti-reason. There's an anti-reason aspect in reality, like Shane. So now what? I don't know.
So then why spend 8 prakim trying to figure it out?
Okay, what's going on in these 8 prakim? They're around and around. This is hard to figure out.
It's around and around, but he repeats himself.
Yeah.
But then again, he's not saying, I don't really. It's not a scientific fact. We're wasting a lot of time and paper on.
No, he wants to make it reasonable.
And we know that are not really going to be facts. It's just
no. There's what we spoke about last year. That even to legislate something, you probably can't legislate something that's 50-50. You can legislate a belief because there's some evidence for it, plus there's rhetorical encouragement for it. All that is necessary for a legislative belief to be true politically. Again, you guys are not. I don't think you're appreciating politics enough. True politically means, is this correct? So yes, it is. If we get, because you don't like politics, because you think that this world can be figured out. Okay, we say it. I hear you have to study. Rambam to appreciate politics. No, Taka. This one. I mean, Rambam changed me in many ways, but one of the deepest ways that I changed from the Rambam is that I realized that politics is very important, and it's very it's true. There's a truth to it. There's a correctness to it. You know, the whole Torah is politics. It's legislation. It's law. What is this business? What is this business? Everyone learns the Torah. Kilu, it's Metzias? It's law. What do you mean? It's law. It's a book of law.
Kokar.
Yeah, it's a lot of kokar. It's a bunch of kokar. It's Koyam Hashem, big letters, whatever. Yeah. No, but it's the ultimate kokar. Kol kari. It was say Nishaya, whatever. Kol is cool.
Kol baby.
Yeah, it's a kol. How about it? No, exactly. That's why the kokar is also legitimate because. Or the illegitimate legislators, and we should replace them with better legislators. Fine. Who's writing the Kol Koris? I'd rather Rambam writes the Kol Koris and Abraham and Moshe than whatever guy. Fine. Yeah. What's the problem with that? What's the problem with that? That's not untrue. It's very true. Again, if you think that one day we'll discover the truth about something, then you have a problem. Then you have a problem. Right. Rambam, you can't. If you happen to think that we're going to discover one day that the world was eternal, or that we have discovered it, then you have to revisit this. But if you believe that we can't figure that out.
But let's say you could figure it out.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
If I understand the way you're describing it as a politically expedient to legislate this,
right.
That's the truth,
right.
then it doesn't make a difference.
As long as we'll figure out Chiddush. No, as long as we'll figure out Chiddush. No, I'm saying if we'll figure out Kadmos, you have a problem.
It doesn't make a difference.
No, because you can't legislate something that we know to be false.
That's what I'm getting.
No, because people can't accept the promises explicitly. Only in a position that you can go either way. So you can accept one side, you can legislate one side. You can't legislate that you must believe something that you know to be false. That doesn't work. It just doesn't work. You can't make a law that people have to believe something that they know to be false. That people are not capable of that.
Is it fair to say that
it's not a good idea? It's also not a good idea. You're just destroying people, making them a shigga.
Is it fair?
No, you see that, right?
Is it fair to say that a legislated belief is basically a scientific way of dealing with something that can't be proven scientific?
Yeah, but it's not. It's scientific in the sense that it's political. It's not scientific like cosmology. As the cosmology goes, it's an open question. But people who, for some reason, either have a need to take a position, or has to be something which is, if they take a certain position, it's going to be beneficial for them in many ways. So let's encourage a certain position. Okay. So maybe I want to say a question like this. So now, if you ask me like this, so here's what happened. I'm suggesting. The Rambam holds like this. Here's what happened. Abraham and Moshe had a certainty that this is how the religion should go. How the religion should go. They're not in the business of doing science. They're in the business of telling us religion. That was their nevuah. Now, what did they think? What did they think? In other words, when they said, when Avram looked at the heavens, right? We have this in Sirah, and we have this pasuk of right from Shemai. What did they think about why Chiddush is appropriate? Okay? They had a nevuah. Chiddush is appropriate, legislatively. Well, it's only appropriate if it's likely and so on and so on. Why do they think it's likely? I don't know. It's an interesting historical question. That's it. That's it. It's an interesting historical question about which we can know very little.
So,
what do we care about?
It
doesn't. Neither of them are true. The whole thing's an anachronism. Avodah Zarah Perek Aleph is a huge anachronism. Yeah, Avraham Avinu was Aristotle. Yeah, sure. But you know what? Nobody cares. I'll tell you why. Because you know what we care about? We care about Avraham Avinu as a Navi. And a Navi is someone who has divine revelation, which is forever. So we, as Nevuchim, we have Chachmas Aristotle. So what we have to do is we have to understand, Al Pi the Chachma that we have, why is this Nevuah correct? And before Aristotle, how did Yeshaya Navi understand why this Nevuah is correct? I don't know. I like to try to get into the mind of Yeshaya Navi and figure out how he thought. And why did Abraham and Moshe think how this is correct? You have to get into their head. But you know what? It could change. It could have two different meanings. One meaning is this, one meaning is that. Reich of Shemayim means two things. Avraham Avinu, we have a Messiah that he learned from the stars. What does that tell us? That tells us that the content of his Nevuah is associated with the stars. In his mind, how is it associated with stars? Who's supposed to know? No one's supposed to know. And that says, who cares what Avraham Avinu thought? I'll tell you why. No one cares what Avraham Avinu thought. You know why? Because Moshe. If Avraham Avinu is speaking for God, then I don't care what he thought. I care what God said through him. Now, there happens to be, parenthetically, there happens to be people only get messages from God, relate to what they think. Okay, so again, you have a historical question of how did Avraham Avinu process this and why was he zeicher to this? But what he said was from God, right? So I don't care what he thought. And if what he said is not from God, then I also don't care what he thought, because let me just start from scratch. I'm smarter than him. I know how to think. Aristotle told me how to think. What am I supposed to do? I should try to think like Avraham Avinu. Why would anyone ever do that? It's completely uninteresting, except as maybe historically, perhaps. But given that Avraham Avinu was a Navi, and given that his whatever his belief got him to, whatever his thinking got him to, now becomes an eternal, a Nevuah Dairis. Nevuah Dairis, the whole idea of the Sefer is that Nevuah Dairis stems with Chachma. Stems with Chachmas Aristotle, let's say, because that's our Chachma. So now us, as good Aristotelians, are going to say, what is the divine message of Reich Shemayim? And the answer is, there are two messages. And I'll tell you one story about Avraham Avinu. That I'm going to plug Aristotle to Avraham Avinu one way, and I'm going to plug Aristotle to Avraham Avinu another way, and the truth lies nowhere in between, and I have no idea what the truth is, because I don't care. Because Avraham Avinu's message is not, there was once a great man named Abraham, and here's what he did, and you should do the exact same thing. Why should you do the exact same thing? Do Aristotle. Okay, maybe you can learn from him, whatever. Maybe you can see what he did and figure out why he did it. I don't know. Maybe you could, maybe you can't. But you know what's more significant? The whole Nevuah starts. You know the truth of the Torah, and really you want to not update. You want to figure out how Chachma and Torah interact. Okay, the truth of the Torah is there's this Nevuah, stars, God, take it from there. You know what that means for an Aristotelian? That means the world moves forever, and therefore there's existence of God, and also means particularization, and therefore yichud and chiddush. Okay, so that's why I want to solve this problem, the numerous steers. And again, I think it's important to understand. I think Avodah Zarah Perek Aleph is the Rambam telling you a historical story, but he's not trying to tell you history. He knows he's making it up. He knows making it up. But the pshat is, this is the pshat of the Torah. The same, the whole Maimonides tells you why the Torah makes sense according to Chachma. So why does Avraham Avinu's story make sense according to Chachma? It's only a historical story, so why do we care? The answer is no, it's not just a historical story. It's a Nevuah story, the Dairis. It's God's message is Abraham and the stars in the heavens. So why is that message to me today in 2024 an interesting message? The answer is because kach. And now you got to take your quantum things and figure out how that plugs back into Avraham Avinu. What? Okay, let me hear Shmuel. Let's hear the Hasan.
I understand. I mean, basically, according to this, if the Rambam, if somebody after the Rambam comes along and writes American to prove Kadmas, and he could just as legitimately stick in Avraham Avinu's Nevuah to prove Kadmas, because now Chachma is telling me Kadmas.
Okay, fine.
So what was the Nevuah? It was nothing.
There was
nothing.
Tell you what the Nevuah.
The stars. Figure out how stars fit into whatever Chachma is. The Nevuah is just a representation of whatever your Chachma is.
No, it's not. There are some limitations.
Your argument is once you prove it, the Nevuah it's not doing the same thing. Once it's proven.
Right. But no, you could either know. One second.
If I believe it's legislatively better.
Right, you could believe it's legislatively better, right.
So then Nevuah comes with that.
No, it doesn't.
Why?
1 second. Well, I don't know what you're saying. If you believe, let's say it's better to say Kaddish, right?
Yeah.
Okay, but that uproots the whole Torah. That's Rambam's problem with Kaddish. It uproots the whole Torah because the Nisim are not possible.
My point is, you're saying that Abraham Avinu and Nevuah, the Rambam is basically it's malleable. To Abraham Avinu meant one thing.
Yeah.
To Aristotle it would mean something else.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Because essentially Nevuah is
because a Navi can know because get Nevuah things that he doesn't have to see. That's a key point. Because a Navi gets Nevuah things that he doesn't know through his eon. Therefore, the reason why Avraham Avinu decided maybe after hearing this Nevuah that this is correct has nothing to do with why it is actually correct forever. That's why, you see, because a Navi's Nevuah and his Eon are not necessarily on the same page. A Navi can know through Nevuah things he doesn't know through Eon. So Avraham Avinu knew through Nevuah that this is the right thing, and somehow that was supported by the stars, or maybe inspired by the stars. More than that, we don't know. But then we have to interpret the Nevuah that has to do with the stars for us.
Which gets to the question:
what's the problem? I know. We keep on getting back to that problem.
That fundamentally is going to change his question.
Right, because if the Nevuah says something about stars.
Because right now we don't know what the Nevuah is.
Right.
So we're saying the Nevuah is malleable.
Right.
But if we can stick to when the Nevuah says Chiddush instead of Kabbos.
Yeah, of course. No, look. Let's take I think a simpler example. Let's take a simpler example. Let's say the pasuk Reichiv Shemayim, right? So I said, there's a steer. What it means. So what's my answer? The answer is it can mean one or the other. It can mean both. Okay, that makes sense. Why? Because you're saying the pasuk is divine. The pasuk is a Nevuah. The pasuk is Samela. It's a divine thing. It means whatever. It means whatever you can figure out that it means. Right? That's not a chiddush. That's understandable. The problem with Abraham Avinu is where's this pasuk? There's no pasuk. If there would be a pasuk that says Vayistaka b'kachavim and such and such, right? If there would be such a pasuk, let's pretend there's a pasuk. Then my point would stand, right? That you'd have the Olam HaTorah would be busy saying Vayistaka b'kachavim means because this lumdus and that lumdus of modern philosophy, and some genius academic would say, "Oh, these stupid guys, they think it means this." Avraham Avinu didn't know anything about that, and the joke's on him. That's my chiddush is, joke's on you because of course Avraham Avinu didn't know that. But guess what? We believe the Torah is divine, and if you don't think the Torah is divine, then don't you have something better to do than studying ancient history and Abraham, whatever, showing and hacking the Olam HaTorah. So this is right. This is divine. You have a good kasha. There's no such pasuk about Avraham. So there's not like a pasuk that says he looked at the stars. Okay, the Rambam says Koine Shemayim. It's a Messiah. Ram said it's a Messiah they looked at the stars. So the Torah doesn't work for a Messiah. The Messiah is a historical fact. Right? Okay, I want to just say one more point and then we'll wrap this up a little bit, okay? But the Rambam's big agenda is the Olam shouldn't just listen to philosophers, should listen to the VM too, right? That's his Seif Perek Tesvav. So I want you to take a look at Perek Chavdal. I want to show you how that's very interesting for the whole project of this Sefer, and specifically for these prakim. In Perek Chavdal, the Rambam again shows how the heavens don't make sense according to Aristotle. Okay, and this is the famous problem of the apparent retrograde of the planets, whatever it is. There was a problem with philosophy and with astronomy. Something didn't add up. Okay, and the Rambam says a very interesting expression. This is the end of paragraph 11. In the Mefusha Torah, and he says this is the real mevucha. Zuhi mevucha shel mamish, and Schwartz translates it as Zuhi hamevucha ha'amitis, which I think is a better translation from what I can tell. Did you find it, perhaps, Shmuel? Because I'd like to know how Kappa translates it. Pass me the Kappa. I want to look at it. Okay, I think Schwartz's translation is more correct. Just don't touch the wires. That Zuhi hamevucha ha'amitis. This is the real mevucha.
Not mevucha shel mamish.
Right, mevucha shel mamish means this is a real mevucha. This is a real mevucha. But really, what it says in Arabic, as far as I can understand, is as Schwartz translates it as this is the real mevucha. Okay, which I want to tell you what that means. This whole sefer talks about the mevucha, right? And what's the mevucha that the audience of the sefer is in? He knows the Torah is true. He also knows philosophy. And Mamela, he's in confusion, right? Here the Rambam reveals to us, the Rambam reveals to us what the real mevucha is. The real mevucha is not, Kapach has Zui HaMevucha B'emes, here it is. Zui HaMevucha B'emes, okay, I think that's correct. Ibn has what? Mevucha Gedolah? Okay. That's interesting, that's weird. No, you're reading it. You're in a different place. There's another place where he says Nebuch Gadol. Yeah, but you have to go back a little bit. That's another place where he says that if he says over there that had Aristotle known this, Aristotle would have been in a Nebuch Gadol. And I want to tell you what this means. The Talmud that he wrote this to, you look in the letter to the Talmud, he didn't advance to astronomy yet. He didn't know astronomy. So what's his Mevuch when you see?
This is a Bilbo
Bemis. Okay, right. Bemis is correct. That's correct. Al Chakik, whatever. But it's also it's with a hey. This is the real Mevucha. The Talmud that he wrote. Look at the letter to the Talmud. The Talmud didn't study astronomy. The Talmud started with astronomy. They went back to math and logic, which come before astronomy. Okay. The Rambam in these parakim tells them a lot of astronomy they didn't know. So I'm starting like this. You know what your Mevucha was? You thought you were a Gresa Chacham. You had all Aristotelian science all worked out. Now you have the Torah. Boom, you have a clash, right? But you know what the real Mevucha is? The real Mevucha is that science itself breaks down. And he says later in this parak, in Chavdal, that had Aristotle known this astronomy that I do, then he himself would have been Nebuch. This is the end of paragraph 13. Okay? In paragraph 13, he brings that Abu Bakr is Mesupik, whether Aristotle knew about eccentric motions of the stars, whatever. Okay? Did Aristotle know it or not? And the Rambam says the truth is he didn't, because mathematics in his time wasn't so advanced, and had he heard it, he would have denied it. Aristotle would have denied this idea that the planets are not in perfect circular motion, whatever it is, and had he known this to be true, he would have been Navach Na'ai. So what the Rambam is doing is, in this whole prakim, you know what he's doing? Everything else in the Moreh Nevuchim, he says like this: there's Chachma and Torah, and they're both true. And you know what? We're going to interpret the Torah al pi Chachma, and it's beautiful. Adarabah, that's the true meaning of the Torah, is Vayir Hashem. Doesn't mean and when it comes to Chiddush Olam, really you could do that also, if you had to, as he says in Berach Hafei, in terms of the Psukim. But Chiddush Olam is where the Rambam is going to show us that the real Mevucha between Torah and Chachma is because Chachma is incomplete. There's a gap within Chachma itself. There's a gaping hole within Chachma itself. And that gaping hole is what the Rambam fills with Chiddush Olam. Because Chiddush Olam is where Chachma basically breaks down, as we discussed in the first year. And the real Mevucha tells you that not just you're going to make Torah and Chachma consistent. The real Mevucha is that we can prove that there's something beyond Chachma. There's something more than philosophy, because philosophy doesn't explain everything. We have to introduce basically religion and Ratzin, going back to the first year. So you see, that's what I'm saying, that everyone listens to the philosophers. Very few people listen to the people that talk with God. That you need a great seichel for. You know what the great seichel you need to listen to the people who speak with God is? The great seichel to recognize the true Mevucha, which is that what everyone thinks is all worked out is actually not worked out. Then you say, you know what? There's something more going on than human reason, because human reason is not the whole story. And this is the Pesach to religion, basically. So the Rambam is sort of undoing the whole Moreh Nevuchim. Moreh Nevuchim is that religion and science are competing. And that's like your mini Mevucha, that's the beginner's Mevucha. Once you get advanced in your studies, because the way you're supposed to study is logic, math, astronomy, and then metaphysics. The student the student who the Sefer was into was not so advanced yet. When you get more advanced, you know what? You're going to come running to me, begging me for Torah. You're going to chap that the Chachma doesn't work, okay? And that's what we're gonna do something other than Aristotle. Right? Till now we're doing everything like Aristotle, whatever. Let's say we're just stimming the Torah. Here we're going to show how it all breaks down, and that's what I want. So I'm saying some people don't chap that the Nevi'im have what to say. Speaking from God also has what to say. All right, L'maisa. Next time is our last year, so maybe we'll do Perek Hafei, where he talks about Torah could stim, but it can't, but then the whole Torah falls apart, whatever those. See if we can find. No, that might help us, because in that parak he said that parak goes like this. He starts off saying the reason why I did not cast not because of psukim. The psukim could work, but then the whole Torah falls apart. Right. So there are psukim. So there are psukim. The whole Torah is psukim. Right. What does he mean? Okay, so I think it might be something here. I also would like to figure out why it's not in the Yudin Malikim, as I maintained. All right, you're not happy.
I'm happy.
Oh, you are happy. Okay, you just died. Okay. All right, so we will leave it at that.